Hey guys, Tom Barclay here at Brighton's Amex Stadium after Tottenham have somehow lost 3-2, having been 2-0 up in the first half and cruising, coasting, playing some of the best football they've played under Ange Postecoglou and looking like they were definitely on for 6 wins out of 6. And then somehow, 18 minutes in the second half, Brighton scored 3 goals and completely turned it around out of nowhere. Leaving Spurs to taste defeat for the first time in 6 games, but also a really different kind of defeat, I would say. Maybe other Spurs fans will disagree with that, but that's definitely the theme of Ange Postecoglou's press conference afterwards. He was very frustrated by the manner of the defeat being somewhat different to what they've seen before and the lack of competitiveness in the team, which I'll come on to. But yeah, I mean, just saying to some of the guys, it's the ultimate cliche of a game of 2 halves. We'll come on to the positives later, but you've got to start with the negatives after that result and that performance. The second half, I don't really know where it came from. Brighton made one change at the break, bringing on Pervis Estepinian at left back. That did improve them, but that wasn't really enough, really, to justify what happened next. And it felt quite like Leicester on the first game of the season, where Spurs should have been sort of 4-0 up by half-time, weren't, and paid for it with a draw. But at least in that game, they were still creating chances. This one, obviously, they were 2-0 up, and to be honest, it didn't really feel like they were going to pay for any missed chances they had, which they still had a few. But that's the way it proved. It's just crazy. 3 goals were all pretty avoidable and pretty terribly defended. And then you've got to say, Destiny Udogie, he's got to take a lot of blame for today's performance. We know what a wonderful young player he is. Very good attacking. Has been good generally. Obviously missed the Europa League game in the week, Ferencváros with an injury. But today, it was all 3 goals they conceded he had a hand in them, unfortunately. So the first one, which is the last thing you want straight after half time, when you're trying to sort of hold on to that 2-0 lead or build on it. And Mitoma plays in a pretty routine cross. Van de Ven can't get to it. And Udogie, probably better if he just left it. But, at kindest, you'd say it was just unlucky that it sort of hit him. But to be honest, it felt more careless, which is probably a good way to describe Tottenham's all-round performance. Careless and lax. And he just got his clearance all wrong, hit him, and just allowed Minter to gobble up a chance at the back post. And then you could feel the sort of tide shifting at that point. Maybe not quite to the extent that after the second goal, but back to Udogie, the second goal, he's got to do better. As should Van de Ven. They were weak defending, which is not definitely what you wouldn't say with Van de Ven generally, and you wouldn't say with Udogie really. Given that in the first half, his pressing along with Maddison led to I think it was the first goal. Yeah. So being weak physically is not normally what you'd associate with Udogie, but from a defensive point of view, that was what happened. And Rutter, made the most of it with a great finish to make it 2-2. And then on the third goal, I think it was a throw-in, or at least the ball was on the wide side, and somehow Rutter gets in behind Udogie. I mean, that's just lax, just get back there and be switched on. And Bentancur, he's made the wrong decision. He needs to clear it. He needs to take safe first option rather than trying to see the ball out. And Rutter, again, capitalises the brilliant sort of sliding half challenge, half cross that loops up, and Danny Welbeck, who's I'm a massive fan of Welbeck and player he is, he can't miss from there. And that's 3-2. So really poor defensively, architects of their own downfall. We've said in the past that Spurs' high line, which was talked about ahead of this game, as was Brighton's, has cost them, and their attacking, relentless approach to attacking football under Postecoglou has often been the source of their problems when it's gone wrong. But I'm not even sure that's really as relevant in this game. It's just bad mistakes and poor judgment, and maybe, I don't know if you could say overconfidence or feeling like the game was won. Real sense of complacency. And then what was worrying after that, given what Postecoglou's sort of biggest strength is how much they create chances against anyone at sort of any time, even if they're conceding goals, they're making chances happen which can lead to goals, but they didn't really have anything at that point. I don't know if you could put that down to tiredness, weariness after being in the Europa League. Obviously they've got players missing, and when it's going well, when you're starting Mikey Moore, a 17-year-old Ferenc Varos, and he's playing brilliantly, it feels like you can play anyone. And it's often the sort of trap I think that fans fall into, is suddenly thinking these young players are ready to play in every game and make an impact. And it doesn't surprise me that suddenly the bench looks quite thin. Fans probably screaming to get more on earlier, but I don't really think. Maybe he would have created something. Maybe he could have, but it's a lot to ask, and it wouldn't have surprised me had it come to nothing. So the lack of chances created was not great, and this is a pretty damning stat which must sum up how frustrated Tottenham fans have felt long before Postecoglou came here with his own moments of frustration for the supporters. This was the 10th time that Tottenham have lost a Premier League game from being in a position of 2 goals up or more. And they are the first team, unsurprisingly, to reach double figures. That just sort of sums up why other fans and the media often including myself, brand Tottenham at times Spursy. And I know fans hate it, but look, this is the ultimate Spursy performance, and that sort of sums it up. And I know fans won't like me saying it, it's something that really frustrates them, but that's what everyone else is going to leap on, just how contriving to lose from a position like this, position of strength, just madness. And Postecoglou was really interesting afterwards in the press conference, because in his time here, after a bad performance, he can be quite short, he can be a bit sniffy, doesn't like criticism from journalists. Although I feel like I've sensed a bit of a change this year. I know the results have improved recently, so he seems to be in a more jovial mood, but he was in a much calmer manner. Didn't take it out on anyone in the press room at all, but was very clear in how frustrated he was, and very clear in some of his words, which will make all the back pages tomorrow, how strong he was. He said, "We didn't do what we need to do at this level. We weren't competitive." That was the key phrase, not competitive. How much they struggled in the duels, how much they didn't want it as much as Brighton, I suppose. That's me saying that rather than him, but really frustrated with that. He said it was unacceptable. Talked about non-negotiables like winning duels and things like that not being good enough. And this is kind of what I was alluding to, and I agree with him on this. He said this is the first time since he's been here they've lost like this. They've obviously lost games before, famous defeats like Chelsea and all that, but it's the manner of the sort of limp aspect of this defeat and the lack of competitiveness, as he says, which hasn't really happened too much under him. That's left him really frustrated, and said all of it was disappointing. I mean, one thing that, he's obviously culpable for this defeat, and fans will talk about his attacking approach. I sort of alluded to that earlier, not feeling like that was really the problem this time, although other managers probably would have sat on that 2-0 lead and maybe seen it out, so I can see where that criticism comes from. Not really on board with that one personally, but I think that's an easy one people will say. But one thing that we'll definitely look at is how late it took to make him subs. I think the first one came in, was it the 79th minute? Basuma and Sarr coming on, and then more came on later. But personally, I feel that it speaks more to the lack of options he's got. Son has got a bit of criticism recently, or suggestions that he's past it, and look how well the team are performing without him. But that experience and that guile and that finishing ability could have been key to the victory today, and he just doesn't have him. He's injured, so that didn't help. And he was asked about subs, and he said he could have done them, but he feels like it's irrelevant. It doesn't really speak to the main issue of why they lost today. And he talked about it being a stark reminder that if you're not competitive against anyone in the Premier League, although Brighton are a good team at home, although are they? I mean, I've watched Brighton more than any team since I've covered professional football, really, and I've seen their whole rise up the leagues, and I'm at their best under De Zerbi. I think they were really, really brilliant. Maybe got found out a bit at times under him, and he was quite a combustible type of manager. I thought the first half Brighton were terrible, and Spurs were really good and capitalised on it, and it felt like, they did well. They took their chances and they really put the screw on Spurs. To be fair, so they are deserving their dues, Fabian Hürzeler's team, but it was more Spurs shooting themselves in the foot, personally, I thought, this game, rather than Brighton being particularly strong. he was asked about whether the reaction he was giving us in the media or the words he was saying, was he relaying that to the team, and basically said that, yeah, I'm sure the players are disappointed, but I don't care about that. Like, they need to feel this. They need to understand that it was bad. He realises he was sort of emotional after the game. Well, I have to say he still handled himself and kept himself very, very calm in the way he was delivering his verdict. And once again, very interesting to listen to. Again, Spurs fans frustrated by this defeat, who maybe be sceptics about the Postecoglou project and the way he does things. Won't probably think I'm sort of buying into the aura of Ange again by saying that, but I just think personally, as a neutral, listening to what he says, it just speaks a lot of sense. And I think he's got it right again in terms of his assessment of where this went wrong. But again, he is culpable for it himself. He'll know that, and it's another disappointing result from a strong position. We had this with Newcastle, had it with Leicester, and then particularly here, Arsenal maybe a bit different, and Arsenal are such a quality team, and we just struggled to break them down. But he was talking about Newcastle. He felt like at least at Newcastle they sort of fought to the death, and the carrot kept on going, kept on trying. He basically didn't feel like he saw that, and that was what was so worrying for him. And that's something he needs to sort out and sort of look at. Like I said earlier, they sort of maybe paid for their wastefulness. I mean, Brennan Johnson maybe should have made it 3-0. His chance it did bubble before he had it, just that chance just before the break, and blazed over. And Timo Werner should have, within 16 seconds, he should have squared it for Johnson to make it 1-0, and his pass was overhit. But again, I don't think it was so much that. They took 2 chances pretty well, got lucky actually with one of them, and I don't know what the keeper's doing. Madison's shot definitely should have saved it. And so I don't know if you can really point to the wastefulness. It's more that lack of attitude and lack of competitiveness in the second half, which really cost them. There are positives because the first half was so good. As I said from the top, this is one of the best halves of football Postecoglou has had his team play, because it showed the confidence they're on, which is why it was so bizarre to see the turnaround that they had. But let's just talk about a few of those positives, really. I mean, Johnson, 6 goals and 6. You just can't miss. And it's a bit like, for a minute, I had Erling Haaland pops into my head. I mean, that's unfair to compare. But when you saw Haaland running through against, I forget which team it was recently, and he's lobbed the keeper, he scooped it round, he's on these one-on-ones, and then the way he took it around the goalkeeper recently, he was just so confident. A bit like the way Johnson took this finish. It was on his weaker left foot, just a beautiful, crisp, confident finish, which is what he's been lacking at times during his time at Spurs, and obviously Timo Werner's been going through most of his career, I suppose, but particularly at the moment with Tottenham. But it speaks to how confident Johnson is right now with his finishing, and that was really impressive. I mean, Werner, as I've just alluded to, will probably once again be a figure of ridicule at times for some of the things he does, but you also can see what he brings to the team with his stretching the play, got an assist for Madison's goal. So, he was a threat. But I was left watching that first half where I thought Dominic Solanke was brilliant in his hold-up play and his just out-muscling midfielders, and didn't really have many chances today, but he was really good on that front. And with the way Johnson is finishing his chances, you just think, wow, if they had a pacey, long-term, clinical, really top left-sided player, whether that be Mikey Moore in time or not, then Spurs are really, really in business. So that was exciting. And on that note, I mean, Mitoma's turning 28 in May, so probably, I wonder if he's such a top player. I watched him a lot, and he obviously had injuries last year. And you wonder if that injury last year sort of cost him his big move, because Brighton wouldn't let him go for presumably less than at least 50 million. I think he's quite got a long contract, and at that age, do many clubs sort of go for that? But I mean, he was brilliant again today, and would really bolster this Spurs team. That kind of player. And criticism of Ange, I suppose, in his team is that Mitoma's been in good form this season after his injury last year. They sort of played into his hands, really. And is that a criticism? Maybe they should have shut him down better. It's hard to do when you get a top player like that, so I can see that perspective. But yeah, a player like that perhaps would really elevate this team. But it's hard to focus on any particular positives at the moment, because that was such a ridiculous, really, sort of throwing away of 3 points. But they deserved it. They deserved it for their, as Ange put it, like the lack of competitiveness they had cost them. And I guess it will be a big learning curve for them going forward. But when you looked at the league table, you thought this was a good chance to sort of jump up and keep pace with the top teams. I don't think anyone's really expecting like a title push for Ange's team this year. But top four is still definitely so early, and if they kick on and how they can hurt teams when they're playing well, seems like a realistic possibility. But already that gap's starting to grow a little bit, and to lose this game was a real blow to that already. And going into the international break after 5 straight wins, it just we head into that in such a downer now. So there are still lots of positive things. A bit of perspective is needed. They have just won 5 in a row. Sometimes they play brilliant football. That first half was excellent, so they need to build from here. But I don't think it's unfair for fans to be A, frustrated, and B, concerned by the lack of competitiveness. That phrase again that Ange said from his team, which he hasn't seen so far. And I think that's fair. I think we've seen that so far. So time to buck up their ideas.